Good afternoon, everyone. I hope everyone is doing well. We will give a couple of extra minutes to have our attendees log on before we get started today. And while we are waiting, if we could have everyone that's logging on, if you could please drop your name, your title, and organization in the chat to let us know where you're joining from. We would appreciate that. Thank you so much. Okay, looks like in the interest of time, we're going to go ahead and get started. So thank you so much for joining today's webinar, the latest in our post-secondary pathways series. My name is Marlena Everett, and I'm the Director of Higher Education at the Hunt Institute, a national nonprofit founded by the four-term North Carolina Governor Jim Hunt. We work across the education continuum to convene and inform policymakers on education policy issues from prenatal to post-secondary. And I'm excited to welcome you to today's session, during which we will delve into the complexities of curriculum development in higher education with a focus on meeting the demands of contemporary and future job markets. And again, just in case you are logging on right now, if you could please drop your name, your title, and organization in the chat to let us know where you're joining from. Thank you so much. And with that, I'll turn the floor over to Christopher Mullen. He is the Strategy Director at the Lumina Foundation, an independent private foundation in Indianapolis that is committed to making opportunities for learning beyond high school available to all. So with that, I'll turn the floor over to you, Christopher.
Thank you, Dr. Everett. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. It's a great afternoon. It's so happy to be here with you as we engage in this really important and critical conversation. I don't know if there's a time when this conversation is never critical, but it seems now even more so it's the case. I have a few housekeeping items to note before I introduce our esteemed panelists, so please bear with me. First of all, our team has turned on closed captioning feature, and it would be live on your screen. If you experience any difficulties at all with closed captioning, please let a member of the Hunt Institute know in the chat and just say, please help with the closed captioning, and they'll be sure to make sure you're okay. Additionally, today's session will be recorded and is currently being recorded and publicized after the webinar. After this session, the Hunt Institute will send out the recording to all attendees. So if you're scrambling taking notes, you can always go back and fix them if you need to. Just know that you can focus on paying attention, not worry about taking notes so much, because the recording will be available to you. Finally, we have time for Q&A, or question and answer, at the end of today's session. We left ample time for that. So please be sure to submit your questions using the question and answer feature. With that said, I'm excited to begin our discussion. Dr. Williams, I'll turn it to you first. Please allow me to introduce you. Dr. Williams serves as the president and CEO of the Thurgood Marshall College Fund, the nation's largest organization exclusively representing the Black college community. The Thurgood Marshall Fund's 47 member schools are America's publicly supported, historically Black colleges and universities, and predominantly Black institutions, educating nearly 300,000 students. Dr. Williams, thank you so much for joining us. Can you tell us about how your work at the Thurgood Marshall College Fund and how it helps HBCU students and PBI students with work-based learning opportunities?
Yes, good afternoon, Chris, and thank you for this, and thank you. A special thanks to the Hunt Institute for putting this webinar together. This is a very important conversation to talk about alignment with higher ed, with work-based learning opportunities. So I love that we're here today, and I got some esteemed colleagues that I'm going to learn from today. At the Thurgood Marshall College Fund, you mentioned, Chris, in your opening that we have 47 members. We actually our board just voted 6 more members in at our last board meeting. We now have 53 members, and we added 6 HBCCs. Those are historically Black community colleges. And the reason why we added the community colleges is because at the Thurgood Marshall College Fund, we work with about 120 Fortune 500 companies and helping them to identify talent and working with them. We place close to 3,000 students in internships, co-ops, immersions all over the country. And we work hand in hand with the Business Roundtable. And the Business Roundtable is an organization that represent the Fortune 500 companies and their CEOs. And we just had our annual meeting in Washington, D.C., and I met with a group of CEOs. And what's on their top of mind is workforce development and preparation. So this conversation is very, very important. We also work with making sure that the students have what they need when they go into these companies. And what we are hearing from them, we have a process where we get feedback from our corporate partners in terms of some of the needs. And so by hearing from them, we try to incorporate that. We have at the fund, we have what we call a developmental program where we take what we learned from our corporate partners and we incorporate it with our preparation and preparing students when they go into these internships so that they're what we call corporate ready. We serve close to, as you mentioned, over 300,000 students. And what's so exciting about this work is that there's a high demand in our country for talent, and there's a high demand for looking for talent that are prepared. And higher ed has a very important role in this in terms of how do we align ourselves with what they're expecting. So I'm just going to pause there and turn it over to my colleagues to hear from their perspective. That's the kind of essence of what we do at the Thurgood Marshall College Fund.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that, Dr. Williams, and really glad to hear about the 6 HBCCs joining the Thurgood Marshall Fund. That's wonderful news because of the great work that those institutions certainly do. I'm going to take a moment now to introduce our next panelist. Her name is Jennifer Freeman. Jennifer is a senior director at Jobs for the Future, which is a national nonprofit organization that works to drive transformation of the education and the workforce systems to achieve equitable economic advancement for all. She works with community colleges, employer and higher education leaders, and state-level policies and practices to improve the career outcomes of community college students, including those traditionally marginalized by post-secondary systems. Jennifer, it's great to have you here. Could you discuss the role of public policy in facilitating or hindering the alignment of higher education curriculums with the workforce needs? And I'm sure there's some policy initiatives that you believe could really serve as a great model for us too.
Yeah, quite a few. And in fact, some right in North Carolina where the Hunt Institute is. So hi, Chris, and thank you, Hunt Institute folks, for inviting me here. I appreciate being here. So yeah, there's a lot of incentive programs that states have created. And when I think about to urge community colleges to align with the needs of growing industries in their states. And I think about 3 categories of sort of there's facilitating policies and some hindering policies. And I think about them in 3 categories. One is incentives, there's state and federal incentives. I think about other kinds of state level policies and practices, and then also the incentives that exist for students. So in terms of state level incentives, there's several states have invested in colleges and provided funding for them to build short-term workforce aligned programs. Those include your own state, North Carolina, which just passed the Propel North Carolina initiative. Virginia Fast Forward is another one. All of these programs that help community colleges prioritize labor market outcomes in high demand sectors. And then federal incentives play a role here too and play out at the state level through the CHIPS Act, the infrastructure investments, some recent investments that basically help to drive this kind of alignment. And I'll use an example in Ohio. The CHIPS in Ohio, the Intel Corporation is investing in a chips manufacturing facility with support of the CHIPS Act and the And it also, that act provides incentives for the entire Ohio community college system, or all the colleges in Ohio, to come together to think about and plan for the workforce pipeline, not only for Intel jobs, when there will be many of them, but also for all the jobs that they expect to appear across the supply chain for Intel. And then in terms of other policies and practices, there are a variety of things states can do and are doing to build stronger collaboration. One of those things is at the state and regional levels. And in many places, the state uses its convening power and pulls together educators, employers, education, economic development folks to together plan for workforce needs and build programming together. There are also systems that states need to create to make sure this alignment works. And one of those is data systems that can actually show the workforce outcomes of students. So colleges can understand what happened to their graduates in the workforce. Did their wages go up? Are they achieving economic advancement? Those kinds of systems are really essential. And then I'll just mention a couple things that are inhibitors that states can work on. Program review processes that are slow and rigid and make it hard for colleges to be responsive to changing workforce needs. They really inhibit alignment with the workforce and need to be changed. States that don't have the kind of data system I talked about, that obviously is also an inhibitor. Colleges can't see, and the public can't see, what the workforce outcomes are of students in certain programs. And then I'll also point to financial aid. Lack of financial aid for short-term, especially the lack of financial aid for short-term programming and non-credit bearing programming, where a lot of workforce-focused programming exists. That is really a problem for students who stand most to gain by being able to be in a program that leads toward a high demand, high wage job. So those are, I'll stop there.
Thank you, Jennifer. I really appreciate it. And I think we all, as somebody who loves data very much, can really appreciate your highlighting the fact that data helps drive our information and inform the program review process. We're going to turn now to our next panelist, Crystal Folger-Hawks. And Crystal has been the program director for Surrey Yadkin Works since its inception in 2021. Crystal works with the business to implement apprenticeships and extended internship opportunities for high school and college students in order to develop a well-prepared and highly engaged workforce. She also works with the Surrey Community College to provide industry-recognized credentials for pre-apprenticeships. Crystal has her BS degree in Family and Consumer Sciences from Virginia Tech and a master's from UNC Greensboro down on the water. It's a wonderful place. Crystal, can you tell us more about your work with Surrey Yadkin Works and how it engages students early with work-based learning opportunities?
Thanks, Christopher. I appreciate the welcome and welcome to everyone else. So far, we've already heard some great things from our panelists, and we started off as a high school and youth work-based learning program only. We started in spring of 2021 with 4 public school systems that all fed into our local community college. We are in a rural community in North Carolina. We are labeled as rural, and our goal was to improve the economic stability in our rural communities by connecting youth to our employers in order to create a more skilled workforce, and also to teach our students those critical leadership and soft skills that they need to become successful employees. One thing we know from our local data, being in a rural community, 85% of our students that go off to a 4-year college do not return to our rural community. And we have wonderful rural businesses that needed talent. They needed forward-thinking youth to come in. And so that's where our program has really been able to help our community engage in that. Since we started in spring of 2021, we have had 612 paid youth pre-apprentices. We started in the spring of 2023, so just last spring, including adult CNAs into our program who are interested in going into the practical nursing and registered nursing. So we've had 33 adults that are in our program since then. We have served 122 businesses. We currently have 56 apprentices, 14 different employer partners in our apprenticeship program, and we've had 5 apprentice graduates. Through our work with Surrey Yadkin Works, we're able to have a connection with our local high schools, our community college, and our businesses. And what we've done is we have created and streamlined career pathways for students while they are engaging in work-based learning at the company. And so that has probably been one of our biggest factors that has made us so successful is we've brought all of these partners together. We really serve as that liaison between the high schools, the community college, and the businesses to all work together to educate these students on all the variety of skills, not only the hard skills that they need, such as the curriculum that they would need at maybe the community college or the high school level, but also all those critical soft skills that they would need to. So our program really encompasses the whole student and helps them through that pathway. And then once they graduate high school, we continue on with that support. If they come to the community college, we have a whole team that continues that support with them as they continue through our apprenticeship program. That's a little bit about Surrey Yadkin Works.
No, that's wonderful. And I just want to lift up something you said. You all said wonderful things, but just the idea that our local students don't even know the companies in their own communities and neighborhoods. And this sounds like through your program, you found a great way to introduce students to great employers and great opportunities in their communities themselves. As a father of 2 high school students, I'm trying to teach them that myself. And so I just really appreciate lifting that up. I can ask questions all day long, people, but really what's important is all of you put questions in the question and answer chat. I've seen a couple pop through, but just make sure that you send your questions in. We'll be sure to answer them. But before we get to those, I just can't help but want to dig in a little bit more with our colleagues here. And so maybe I'll start with you, Dr. Williams, and say, you've learned so much with the now 53 institutions that you work with, and how can higher education institutions and employers center equity in ensuring access to apprenticeship and internship opportunities?
Yeah, so Chris, I'm just here, I'm in awe right now listening to Crystal talk about what she's doing in Surrey and Yadkin County. That to me could be a model for the whole entire country in terms of what's happening and what's needed. What we're hearing from our corporate partners is exactly what Crystal just stated in terms of making sure that our students, when they graduate, that they have these soft skills and they're ready for work, ready to go in. Those are some of the things that's not happening real time in college classrooms. Like we know they don't have the opportunity to do it because a lot of faculty members are focused on their instruction. They got to get their information out to the students. But what they have to have these soft skills, and they got to have these ability to be able to communicate and create pathways. So I just love hearing Crystal sharing that what they're doing down there in Surrey County and Yadkin County together, which is a clear partnership and working within the community. At Thurgood Marshall College Fund, we get up every day with the love of being able to carry out the legacy of Justice Thurgood Marshall, who was all about equity, and equity is about fairness. And equity is about creating opportunities for those who may not have those opportunities out there for them, and creating those pathways that will be intentional, that will allow those students that may not have what other students might have. We serve a population of students that are about 90% of our students qualify for what we call the Pell Grant. And the Pell Grant is a entitlement program, and parents who have a family income of less than $50,000 a year, those students will qualify for a Pell Grant. And a Pell Grant, those funds come from the federal government. So if you come from a family that just don't have any extra funds hanging around to be able to send you to, say, Boeing for an internship, well, if you go to Boeing, you may need a place to stay, and you may need some food to eat. And so what we do at the Thurgood Marshall College Fund, we make sure that those barriers are removed, because you're now creating an opportunity for someone that may not have those resources to be able to get them. And so when we partner with our corporate partners, we tell them clearly that this is not about giving somebody an advantage. This is about leveling the playing field and creating equity and a fairness process. Because if you got one person who comes from a, say an upper middle class family, and they got someone who's already in corporate America and they know the game, they know the rules, they know how to play it, and they know what you need, and know you need those extra resources, versus someone who's coming from a community where they might be the first in their family to go to college, first in their family to be exposed to corporate America, and they don't know the rules, but they got the same GPA. They got the same academic curriculum. They're both engineering majors. They have the same level of skill set. And so what we do, we create those pathways at the Thurgood Marshall College Fund of opening those doors for those that don't have someone to open a door for them. And then when they walk in, then they can be their authentic self, because they bring the same level of skills, same level of intellect, same level of talent. But you can't get there if you don't know how to get in. And sometimes what we do, we help bring our students along and letting them know that you're going to be in a different environment, and we help them. The whole concept around work-based learning is by creating these opportunities where they can learn about a higher ed or corporation and the culture of that corporation, so that they can be successful. So we prepare them with those tools, so that it's not giving them an advantage, it's actually giving them an opportunity to be able to compete in a very strategic way. So that's what Justice Marshall was about, in terms of leveling the playing field and creating opportunities so that we can all work and compete together. And so I know people who are in this audience, we've all had someone to help us. I know I've had a lot of people to help me. So if you think you can do it by yourself, somebody's good for you. Good luck. I think, especially trying to move in this space, you're gonna need someone to open a door for you. You're gonna need someone to say something nice about you when you're not in that room, and when you want someone to be able to carry that load. And that's what we do at the Thurgood Marshall College Fund, and we create that opportunities for our universities for our students who are attending these institutions to have that opportunity.
What you said, Dr. Williams, is just really so important. And it's like one of those aha moments for many of us who work in this space and really are learning and growing every day to become better at who we are and what we see. And so I just want to applaud you for that. I have a friend to kind of echo your point and something Jennifer said beforehand, which is, privileged people have the time and resources to figure the systems out. Right? Right. If I don't have to work or I don't have a job, I can spend 2 hours on the internet to figure things out, or what form I have to fill, or what the program review is, or the case may be. And if you have a job, like I went to college on the Pell Grant, like you're talking about, like there was no time for me to sit around and try and figure out your system. So how do we make the processes more transparent, easier, and provide that social capital? We had a question in there about some social and economic supports we'll get to in a second, but how do we streamline the process? And it sounds like the great work of the Thurgood Marshall Foundation is really doing a lot of that for individuals. And so people hear a lot of things when they hear about advancing equity, but part of it is giving individuals the same resources who are otherwise fully equipped and don't have access to it. And we just don't know. And as adults, we don't know. And that's what this is wonderful thing's all about. I really appreciate the Hunt Institute pulling this webinar together to share this information in the community, of capacity building. And so, Jennifer, I mentioned you before, and you shared so much great things when you talked through about all the different student and state and federal incentives and what might be. Like, in your view, how can higher education institutions, and by that I mean, let's just say post-secondary institutions, colleges, trade schools, universities, whoever your partners might be, adapt their curriculum really to meet the needs of evolving workforce? Like, can you share a little bit more in your thinking in that area?
Yeah, sure. And I love the direction of this conversation, because what Crystal and Dr. Williams are sharing about work-based learning and hands-on opportunities and the additional supports that students need so that they have equitable access to those opportunities is exactly part of my thinking. That I know you asked me about curriculum, but it's really to take a holistic view about what the college needs to do to support the career mobility of all of its students. So it's the kind of support that Dr. Williams was talking about. It is looking at apprenticeships or work-based learning, learn and earn programs of some kind, so that students get more hands-on exposure to the workplace. That's that really helps ensure that colleges help employers can see whether what students are learning is working well in the workplace, and students have a leg up because they have that experience under their belt before they actually go into the workplace full time. But in terms of curriculum specifically, there are a few things that colleges are doing and should be doing, and that is, again, a word you like, data. They need to be looking at labor market data, and they need to be looking at traditional Department of Labor sources about like growing industries, as well as non-traditional sources that are available through companies like Lightcast, where you look at real-time like job posting data to see what kind of skills are being asked for in certain industries, and see where the jobs are. And then it's really important to vet your understanding of the workforce with employers. This is what we're seeing. This is what the data is telling us. Is this true? Is this what you need? Does this reflect your needs? So building those actual employer partnerships, we actually have a new guide to equity-focused employer engagement. And I included, Emily dropped one of those guides in the chat. So you can take a look at that. And the other thing is, colleges really need to sort of not just have someone collecting data, but really to analyze it and make it available to people across the college and useful to advisors, to program designers, that they need a process for kind of integrating the use of that data across the system. And then also engaging employers more deeply, not just looking at curriculum, but offering work-based learning experiences, offering hands-on experiences. Those are some of the things that come to mind for me.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And I think you hit right the nail on the head. I love data, we all say do, but that's just the beginning. Once you have numbers, you need to have the qualitative part to understand really what it means and interpret it. And it seems like, we have Crystal here who's on the ground interpreting data in real time and running a program. So Crystal, let me turn to you and say, like, what steps can employers and industry leaders take, right, to actually use this data to promote career pathways for high school and college students, to make them really like understand and take action to move forward?
Yeah, so this has probably been one of the, most powerful things we've done in our community. First of all, you have to build relationships with your employers. So it can be, and especially in a rural community, it could be also in a metropolitan area, city, that your employers are so focused on work and what they do. It's like education is that whole other area over there, and just like do your job and get them to me as best you can. How do we work together? So what we have focused on, there's 122 businesses I talked to you about, is we focus on building relationships with those employers and truly asking for their input, especially when it comes to courses and curriculum. And what is probably the most important thing is do what they are suggesting, if it's feasible, right? So a lot of times we ask for, how do you think this would work? What's your input on this? And then we say, thank you, and we move on, right? So that's where we have really stopped and said, okay, you are sharing with us that this is what you see and how can we implement it? And, one example is, we had one employer who really had some major concerns about the students always coming and failing their entrance exam for a degree that they were getting, right? And it was really just some communication, because in the curriculum, they were teaching this skill a specific way. This employer was looking for it a whole nother specific way. So by getting the employer together with our instructors, they were able to customize some things so that way the students were prepared for them. Once again, building relationships. We were not playing games of like, you're the employer, you don't know what you're talking about. We know what we're doing. Nope, we're the employer, we know what we're doing. It was all about just getting together and communicating. Another thing that we were able to do with employers in North Carolina, we were not able to put students in hazardous and detrimental areas when they were 16 and 17 years of age. So we just worked with our local employers, and we worked with our legislators, and we changed the law. So we are able to put youth who are in, if you're a student who's taking welding and have a certificate in welding, it's awful for them to have to wait till 18 when they've been doing welding for over a year at the community college level. So we have been able to change that law with employers. So that's that collaboration by bringing them in and then following up with them when you are asking for their input, and then you change things, letting them know we're moving forward with this because of your input. And engaging the employers also in the student's pathway is so important. So every single one of our pre-apprentices is paired with a mentor. And we highly encourage that mentor to talk to them about classes that they're taking. What would be some suggestions they have? You know, most of our businesses, they're from our community. So a lot of them have gone to the community college. So what was your pathway when you went to the community college and some of the courses you took? And how can that help me? What would be your suggestions? So we really tried to work with our employers and make it that holistic that Jennifer was talking about, that holistic approach that we're all in it together and we're all trying to help this student navigate this whole crazy life that we call like real life, grown-up life, going to work every day, getting there, doing the right things, right? That they're just like not sure about yet. So we're all trying to navigate that for them and give them guidance and help them on that pathway. And so I think that's probably the most important thing. I always say things come down to relationships. And I feel like with us, our success has been, we've really had our business partners, our schools, the high schools, the community college level, all invested in this and really valued their input. And then we followed through with what they said they wanted us to do.
That's wonderful. And I want to thank all the participants. We have lots of questions coming in already, so please keep them coming. We're going to do our best to get through as many of them as possible. I think the first one, Crystal, I'll come back to you. I'm going to break up my rhythm of going from, rotating around. It's the switch gears here and say, there's a question about for the apprenticeship placements, like how far out into your rural community do you go? Like, where do you draw the boundaries? Is it an hour too far? I think part of this is we know there's sometimes transportation challenges for students in particular. So in a rural setting, you have the buses in the city. I was just in the city, So can you just speak a little bit about the geographical challenges or considerations one might have to put in consideration?
We really tried to stay within our 2 county borders. And so it can be, some students are going maybe 45 minutes or 30 minutes. We also really factor in their location. We do provide transportation for students that do not have it. And that is just looks so different. It might be a school bus taking them one day. It might be a van. It might be me going by and dropping a kid in the back seat saying, let's hit the road to your business, right? So, because what I love about that though is I've never had a student that did not use our transportation for the whole semester. All of them saved their money and were able to purchase a vehicle through our program because they're being paid. And so it's really important that we help them. You talk about that, that equity, Dr. Williams. So important that we help them get started with this journey. So we really tried to make it close to them. We also, it's super important, we match their personality to the business. So we have all of these questions that we're asking them so we can learn the culture of the business, but then we learn what the student kind of work environment they really are going to thrive in. And I think anybody on this call can say they've probably been in a work environment they didn't thrive in, right? It was good for somebody else, not for them. And so we know that, and we really work hard to match students with their personality and who they are and what kind of work they want with a business that meets that culture.
Hey, Chris, can I double click on something that Crystal said that I think is very important for the audience to hear? She said something that is so powerful, and that was paid internships. Not free, paid internships. These students need to be paid. And we tell, in all of our internships, they're paid. So, people come in and say, well, you need a work experience, come in and work for us for free. No. These students need to be paid, and that's important. Just like Crystal just said, that person used the money to buy a car. Now you're leveling the playing field somewhat because they're getting paid. So I just want to double click on that because that's a big thing in this space, especially when you're doing these apprenticeships and you're doing these co-ops, that they're not free for the employer to take advantage of the talent coming from our high schools or coming from our community college or coming from our 4-year institutions.
No, I think that's really important. It kind of ties in. I was going to come back to Dr. Williams for the question that was in the chat was about like, how do we get more students and parents information to engage in these types of opportunities? You know, I mean, I think, you know, we could just name, sometimes there's this idea of like tracking and concern around that from an equity perspective that's historically been there. So how do we address these as a, I guess being paid is one of them, right? But how do we really make sure that when we message this to parents and to kids as opportunities beyond high school, or that start maybe in high school or even middle school, are really good for them in the long term, in the long run?
Yeah, so that's a very good question. I think the sooner the better. And what I mean by that, I hear the high school connection, but also aligning with that pathway process. We just did, for example, and I didn't know you were going to ask this question, but we just had 400 freshmen and sophomore students to come and spend 3 days in Baltimore, Maryland. And we're calling this a development conference. And at this conference, we are creating what we call badges and helping students with their resume, helping students how they interview for jobs. And this is preparing them for these internships. And you will be amazed at the number of students coming in and say, wow, I didn't know that. How do you network? They said, can you share, what I've heard networking. What is that? What is that? So taking those kind of basic things that we all can take for granted because we know it now. But when you're 16, 17, or 18, you don't know that. You don't know what you don't know. So I think the more you research and the more you look at these programs, this type of development activity that we're doing, we're taking it all over the country strategically where our institutions are located. And we're going to do another one this summer in Atlanta, then we'll do one in Charlotte, and strategically inviting these students to apply to be a part of this. And we pay for all of the transportation to get them here. So we don't make any assumptions that we use our corporate partners to pay for it. We had one corporate partner who paid for all 400 students to come and paid for their hotel, paid for some kids didn't even have a suit. So we helped them get a suit, things like that to make them ready. Again, going back to the equity point again, kind of leveling the playing field. I think the more we do it, the better, the more communication we get out there, the better, because students just don't know what they don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's really important. And I have a question for maybe Jennifer could be the one, but feel free anybody to weigh in, and happy to have you all engage in me step back. That's how I got through my dissertation. I got everybody kind of arguing and I kind of got out of the way. But Jennifer, there's a question about, and maybe it's more of a national, so maybe you'd be good, about really apprenticeships with people getting to re-enter society, maybe through incarcerated programs for incarcerated individuals or whatnot. Do you have any information or things you can share about that? And also turn to my other colleagues if they have something else to add.
Yeah, well, we have GFF has a Center for Justice and Economic Advancement. And I encourage folks to kind of go to our website. We definitely work with a lot of colleges and corrections departments that offer education while people are still incarcerated, and then work to help find opportunities for people to move on once they come out. We work a lot with on policy efforts on ban the box and other kinds of initiatives like that. So people have greater opportunity and aren't immediately discounted from jobs when they are return from incarceration. But I'd love to hear what other folks have to say about that.
I did notice that the question also, I basically talked about opportunity youth, disengaged youth. One thing we're doing, and it's definitely interesting concept, is we are starting a high school inside of one of our manufacturing companies for our disengaged or opportunity youth. And so they will go to school half of the day, and then the other half of the day they will work at the company, and they're going to be making a high dollar wage for the company. So we're going to be doing work-based learning with them and teaching them skills through a program that is not on their traditional high school campus. And we're going to be doing some college courses for them there as well to get them some certificates and some trainings and things like that. And we have about a 18% population of disengaged youth in our community. So that's non-working 16 to 24-year-olds. So we're hoping to catch them early from that dropout and start them out as a freshman and really work with them. So we're going to apply my same program. It's just going to be inside of a company. They'll go there all day long. There will be classrooms on the campus, teachers on the campus, and then that work-based learning program where they're going to get to make a product, they're going to make money, they're going to be paired with a mentor and really hopefully help them get through this whole, really, it's just a bad situation they're in. And so we're trying to get them on that other side, right? We're going to get you all the skills and get you completely prepared. And then if they want to have a job upon graduation, they will have a job as long as they performed well. If not, we'll help them with their next step. If it's community college, if it's four-year college, if it's military, we're going to plan to help them with that next step.
Yeah, I tell you one thing that we're doing at Thurgood Marshall to Jennifer and Crystal's point in terms of creating these opportunities, because we all have heard that how do you define success? What is success? You grow up and say, okay, go to college, get your 4-year degree, you're successful. Well, we don't have everybody that's interested in going to a 4-year degree. There's a lot of people out there who don't necessarily want to go to a 4-year institution, but they want to go to work and they want to go straight to work. So what we're hearing from companies is that there are amazing jobs out there that don't necessarily require a 4-year degree, but you got to have some preparation and you got to have some skills. So what we're doing with our HBCCs, we're developing programs designed for what we call alternative pathways. And we're working with corporations we have 6, the HBCCs that we have in our network. They're all in the state of Alabama. And in Alabama, there's some great companies that are down there, and they're looking for people who are ready to go to work. So that's a pathway there. And what we work with the corporations that if these students decide later on that they want to go and get a degree, that there's a pathway for that they will pay for them to get that associate degree or to get that 4-year degree. Because sometimes, people are just not ready at 18 to go to college, but we sometimes push them out there anyway. And then when they get out there and they don't do well in school, then we get mad at them. But the reality is that if they're not ready, but they may be ready 4 years later, that there's a pathway for them to get that degree, because it's about what we call continuous learning, continuous education, creating those opportunities and creating those pathways that they can see. If you're out there and there's nothing you can see or touch or feel, you're going to feel like, well, there's no hope. But as long as you're creating opportunities that they got different lanes that they can go into, and there are pathways that's going to help them get there, you're gonna not only help them, but you're going to help society, you're going to help the community, you're going to help people in terms of improving their quality of life at the end of the day, because that's what higher education will do, is to help you have a better life in terms of your preparation in college.
Yeah, I think go ahead, Jennifer, please.
Chris, sorry, could I jump on this question of job or college or, both? I just want to kind of applaud what Dr. Williams is saying. And we too, as we're working with colleges, and we work with a lot of disconnected youth, as you do, Crystal, and look at alternative pathways a lot. And I really, with colleges, trying to create systems that allow people to kind of come and go, enter when they can, gain some skills, go into the workforce, come back and gain some additional skills to be able to move up. That notion of stackable credentials is really important, so that people aren't just get short-term training and go into a job that is a low wage, but there's no opportunity to move beyond that. So and I want to just point out a resource. I put in the chat a report called "When is a Job Just a Job and When Can It Launch a Career?" And it's a few years old now, but it's an older but a goodie. It kind of helps colleges or any kind of educational institute, post-secondary institution, kind of analyze the programming they're offering, and breaks jobs down into kind of dead-end jobs that are jobs that people get and stay in, and that they're good and fine, sort of build a fine career there. and jobs that launch into like higher wage pathways. So it's really important as post-secondary institutions are looking at this to be able to respond to the folks that Crystal and Dr. Williams are talking about, like people who need some skill, but really want to enter the job market quickly. And then maybe later, in maybe a few years, they're able to move on and get a degree. All of us need to be looking at programming that allows for that.
Couldn't agree more. You know, at Lumina, we're a private foundation, but we're about education beyond the high school. You know, and that's been one of the hardest things, is to let people know college can be a range of things, because it has as a mental model of a quad with grass in it. We sit around, have a latte, and then go to class, and that's just not the lived experience of a whole lot of people, today's students that are pursuing really tomorrow's credentials. And so we've got about 10 more minutes. I might try and merge two questions together in the chat, because I think they're kind of related, or maybe not, and I'll leave it to all of you to respond. One is as to like what kind of assessments are done to get input from students. We talked a lot about the employers and their feedback and how they're involved, but after students go through the program, like what kind of feedback do you get, or mechanisms are there from students, or how is this, you know, important or centered in the work? And then kind of how does that might inform the curriculum moving forward? Because sometimes curriculum is something that, you know, faculty might see as their own, or instructors, or whatever the case may be. So how do you kind of do that full loop of evaluation to help get the student perspective on the work as well?
Let me jump in on that one. I think what we do here, and I'm going to answer it in a different way. We do assessments in the early part of the process. And what I mean by that, it's about fit, right? You want to make sure that the student that you are engaging with and the particular company that you may partner with, that there's a fit associated with that, so that when they go there, they can be successful. Because people are looking for, you know, if a company is investing in you in an internship, it's like a transactional relationship, right? So they're going to give you something, but they want something out of in return, and they potentially could get an employee that could be with them for 15 years or so, even though we know that people change jobs like 7 times now, but the reality is we use Gallup assessment tools. That's what we use at the Thurgood Marshall College Fund. They have a culture fit tool that we use. We also use strengths finders to determine whether or not their strength, so going in, if you like to interact with people, if you like to interact with computers. So sometimes we don't know what we like and what we do well. So we have assessment tools kind of gauge that. So when we do these placements, that we're not just shooting in the dark. We're placing them very intentionally with partners that are looking for a certain level, certain skills. And then at the end, because we have some partners who are looking for 100% conversion, 100%. If I hire you, I want to convert you. I got a job ready for you to convert over after you graduate. We have some partners who just want to be able to get you in and then let you kind of decide on whether or not you like it or not from that perspective. But we don't take any chances we match them up appropriately based on their credentials, based on their degrees and their level of interest. And you believe it or not, the feedback that we get after 4 years, after they graduate, we have a process where we go in and we check in with our employers, our partners, to kind of hear from them, if they're satisfied with that, because there are other things that we do in terms of monitoring their progress once they transition into a company. So we do a lot of early on assessments to make sure that when we're placing these students, that they have a good chance of winning.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is so important. That's why I really feel like we've been so successful. We've gotten to know our businesses really well, and we're really working hard to put them in the right fit. That is so important. Mm-hmm.
There was a question here that came in. I'm trying to see where it was, but it was sometimes relationships go may not have been great for a while for reasons that are just reasons and historical. So like when you encounter those situations, like what are some tactics and strategies you might use to kind of like repair a relationship with an employer who may or may not have had an experience in the past, might not know anything about you, might have had one thing, so how do you handle those relationships and get them on a good direction? I
encountered that a lot when I started. And I just would always apologize to them. I would not even know what it was, not even know the people involved or whatever, but I listened, a lot about complaining is listening, right? Just want somebody to hear you. So I'd listen, and then I'd really listen to what they were saying. Most of the time, the things they had said were very valid, right? Very valid complaints of why you would be upset with any kind of educational partner around, okay? And then I made sure that if I could connect them with someone to get it fixed, we did. And I followed through on those connections, and then just made sure from then on out, whatever their concerns were, we addressed them and dealt with them in a very timely manner. And if I couldn't change things, like there was just an issue recently, I could not change it, right? And so I just sat them down and said, this is why I cannot change it. I wish I could. And they were like, well, thanks. I really appreciate this. And what's going to happen is they're not going to go off and talk bad about the situation, right? Because I looked them in the eye and told them what the situation was, and I wish I could have changed it, but I can't. So I just think, once again, building those relationships and following through, and really liking the people you work with, and not wanting to disappoint them, and realize we're all on the same team. We're all on this team together to have successful students, a great community that thrives from economic development, right? So I think that's huge. That's an important factor.
Yeah, I agree with Crystal on that. One of the things that we have, we've been in this space for over 37 years, and we have partners that've been with us 37 years. So it's a partnership. It's not a one-off. It's a real partnership here. We're not a headhunter type organization. We are helping companies to help identify talent. That's why I say it's important for us when we go through this assessment tool early on, is that I have this thing where I got one big corporate partner that we work with. Before we send our students there, I meet with every single one of their managers that our students will be connected to. And I help them to give them a blueprint of the type of student that's coming into your environment in terms of something about their background. We have a large percentage of students who are what we call first generation corporate. And so we help them to understand. So don't come in and make certain assumptions about these students, that they're talented, but we want you to understand, their background, because that's sometimes important. And once you get into a corporate kind of a corporate environment, it's a whole different ball game. They got their own little way how they promote, how they move people around, some nonverbal. They got a lot of stuff going on. So we do a lot of teaching with our students to help them navigate the system once they get inside. We also have mentors that we connect them with, and we want them to make sure that they have a partner inside of the company that will be advocating for them once they get there. Because it's all about not got you, it's about them being successful. So if they're going to be successful, you're going to have to be all in too as a partner. And if you're all in, you're going to make sure that, if this person comes in, they're going to have the right tools so that they can be successful. They're going to get the right mentor that they're going to match them with, that can give them some good advice as it relates to navigating the system, especially promotion. We want people that's going to go in and that there's a pathway for promotion when they arrive, that it's not a process where they got a warm body. They got someone who, I think you mentioned the word career. It's not a job. I think Jennifer said it's not just a job. This is a career. And if it's a career, there are other things involved in that, in terms of they can sit and drink some latte coffee and relax at certain times in the break room. But it's just helping them to understand that from the very beginning.
That's great. And we hear there's a question in chat that's related, but I think I'll change it just a little bit. It's kind of like the scaling up question, right? And so, as great a work as you're doing in Surrey, Yadkin counties, and with with your partnership, you can go nationwide, right, Crystal? And so the question is like, how do we scale something to other communities that might be bigger or whatnot? And embedded in that is like, is it networks, or like, if you want to take this and expand it to larger communities and kind of make it work? Yeah.
And so I know in the chat, the playbook was put in. So the playbook was created. The Belk Institute, a few others have funded this to try to help other areas, basically scale up our program. We do have a couple counties in North Carolina that are starting their first year of scaling up, and I am working on mentoring them as well. And I think one of the most important things because I think the question was like, what problems do you foresee in this, or how would you do it? Those kinds of things. I think, something that is really important when you are trying to start initiatives like this that involve so many people, okay? So many people coming together. It's like egos have to be at the door. Like, we got 4 school superintendents that are competitors to come together, right? We got 2 sets of county commissioners to fund it. We basically just had to stop and say, like, you know what, let's like not play this game of who's going to do it better. Okay. It's got to be what's the right thing for our community. And that is what like I guide our team on every day when we are answering difficult questions. I say, is it right for the student? Is it right for our business? And is it right for our community? And if we can't say yes, then we're not making the right decision. So we got to figure out another decision to make. Okay. And so I think that's so important. That is probably one of the areas that is struggles, right? Because everybody kind of wants to take ownership of things that are going well, or like it, that kind of thing. You've really got to put like all cards on the table when you're trying to come forward in a program like this and say, we are looking long-term to make a huge impact in our community. What are all the things that we have to do to put aside, to not worry about, just to get to that goal? And that's hard for people, right? It's hard sometimes.
That's absolutely true. And just the note, the webinar cuts off right at 3 o'clock, just so you know. So we're gonna try and figure out how to land the plane, but still get like another question in perhaps. But Jennifer, did you want to add something to that? And then maybe I'll ask one question everybody wants to know about it, which is like AI and how it ties in. So Crystal and Dr. Williams, get it in your head, and then Jennifer, go ahead.
Okay. Just one quick thing about scaling is that, I think it's important, and maybe this is the role of national organizations like ours, Chris, that we get the word out about the return on investment for employers. This is valuable for employers. It's not just like a charitable thing. They actually need workers, and if they want workers, that they need to be working with these kinds of programs. And then also what I was saying, state, it doesn't have to just be about money at the state level, though that helps. But the states like providing convening power, like it takes work for these players to come together. And that kind of convening effort can make it easier for employers to work with educators and vice versa. So those are a couple of things that come to mind for me for scaling.
Okay, that's very true. It's putting like-minded, wonderful people in the same room together. It's amazing what they can do. And so I will give you, if you can, a two-sentence answer. You can't use ChatGPT or Copilot or anything like that. But how do you think about generative AI in this space? And then in 2 sentences, so we run out of time because I want to get everybody's voice. Also, with you, Jennifer, AI.
Me first. Okay.
Yeah.
AI. So there's a report in the thing about AI. One thing that we found in our research about AI is that the kind of skills that people are going to need are going to be are ever changing, right? But the things that will really endure continue to be human skills, those so-called soft skills, which aren't so soft, like skills of communication and analysis and whatnot, are the things that people really are going to need into the future.
That's so well said. It's like this book, Shop Class as Soul Craft. If you ever read it, it reminds me of it. So thank you for that. Dr. Williams.
I just got embrace it. You got it. It's here. It's not going anywhere. You got to embrace it. And faculty members, if you're on this call, embrace it. Embrace it. It's not going to go anywhere, and you can learn from it. And people are taking it to their advantage. So that's my thoughts on it.
Perfect. Embrace it. And Crystal, maybe one sentence.
So I would say, work with your employers on how you want to implement the skills that they need for the students that you have coming up to get them ready for what the employers are going to need.
Wonderful. You're fantastic. I want to take a road show with you all the time. I'd love to be on a panel with you every week, but we can't. So I'll be at home. I'm sure you've got as much of this as I have. Thank you all very much for being a part of it. As we finish the session, I want to, again, thank you for joining us, not only my esteemed panelists, but those in the chat who've been asking these great questions. The Hunt Institute will share the recording of this in the coming weeks. Always feel to reach out. I know there's questions about like data and resources. I'm sure all the panelists will be happy to share more information. Thank you for all the questions. We didn't get to all of them. I do want to spotlight that the Hunt Institute's upcoming Post-Secondary Pathways webinar next is on Thursday, April 11th at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. Please register for it. We look forward to seeing you back here. And thank you all so much for taking time out of your busy days for being here to really just be in community and learn a lot about the real power that these opportunities provide to our communities. On behalf of the Hunt Institute, thank you all for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you
you,
for having us.
everyone.